Okay, let's dive right into this explainer on a vehicle that has been absolutely taking over automotive social media lately. If you've spent, any time at all scrolling through your car feeds, you've definitely paused and just stared at this aggressive, dark-themed custom luxury beast dubbed the Genesis Night Emperor 2026. I mean, it looks incredible, right? It literally looks like the ultimate villain car. But today, we're going to break down the actual source material behind this viral sensation and figure out exactly what's fantasy and what's reality.
But before we get totally swept up in the massive hype train for this premium SUV, we need to stop scrolling for a second, take a breath, and ask ourselves a pretty fundamental question. Does this thing even exist in the real world? It's just so easy to see a hyper-realistic image online and instantly start calculating those monthly payments in your head. We've all been there. But in our modern digital age, seeing really isn't believing anymore. We have to look past the pixels and examine the facts of what Genesis Motor is actually putting on the assembly line.
So, Section 1, the fantasy, why we love it. Let's take a look.
Let's break down the sheer visual appeal here, because it's a lot. On the exterior, you've got this all-black night edition styling that gives it an incredibly intimidating presence on the road. Visually, it steps right into the ring and goes toe-to-toe with absolute heavyweights, like the Range Rover or the Bentley Bentayga. But it perfectly balances that aggressive exterior with a gorgeous premium interior. Based on the renders we're seeing, it features this sleek, minimalistic dashboard and really high-quality materials, which, aligns perfectly with the clean luxury aesthetic that Genesis is already famous for.
Honestly, this concept represents a total masterclass in quiet luxury. When people want to customize high-end SUVs, they usually turn to tuning houses like Mansory or Brabus. And hey, those builds are incredible, but they're undeniably flashy. They're built to show off. This Night Emperor concept, though, takes a totally different route. It appeals directly to buyers who want something custom and aggressive, but who still prefer an understated, sophisticated vibe over, shouting for attention.
And the fantasy of this vehicle is heavily amplified by the badge on the grille. Genesis has built a massive reputation as a true value-for-money brand in the luxury sector. The math here is incredibly appealing. Genesis vehicles historically undercut their major rivals, specifically Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Range Rover. So the dream here is that if this Night Emperor were a real purchasable vehicle, you'd likely be getting top-tier, head-turning presence for significantly less money than you'd pay the German competitors. Which brings us to Section 2, the reality check. Proceed with caution. All right, it's time to drop the hammer of truth. This is not a real production model. That's the biggest issue by a mile. The exact Night Emperor version you're seeing in all these viral images is almost certainly an AI-generated image, or at best, a highly skilled, digitally modified concept. It's totally unofficial. What that means for you as a consumer is incredibly simple and maybe a little heartbreaking. You cannot walk into a Genesis dealership and buy this exact car. It just doesn't exist on an assembly line.
Because this is just a digital concept and not an official production model from Genesis, making any kind of buying decision or comparison becomes pure guesswork. We're dealing with some really dangerous unknowns here. We have zero verified data on what kind of engine would even sit under that hood. We don't know the horsepower, the torque, the 0 to 60 times, nothing. And most importantly, because it's not real, it has unproven reliability. You're essentially falling in love with a ghost, which is honestly the modern tragedy of catching serious feelings for an AI prompt.
Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, whatever, I'll just buy a stock SUV and have a custom shop build this exact look for me. Look, if you attempt to chase this viral render in the real world, you're taking on massive aftermarket risks. To replicate this, you'd need parts that might be incredibly hard to source, or they might have to be entirely custom fabricated from scratch. Furthermore, heavily modifying a luxury SUV like this almost guarantees your resale value is going to drop right off a cliff, and you will immediately cause serious, irreparable issues with your factory warranty.
Plus, even if you successfully built a flawless replica, we have to remember the inherent brand limitations. Genesis makes fantastic cars and offers amazing value, absolutely, but it simply doesn't carry the ultimate prestige and historical exclusivity of ultra-luxury brands like Bentley or Rolls-Royce, or even the specialized clout of a Brabus build. You'll have a really cool customized Genesis, sure, but it won't magically transform the badge into a $500,000 ultra-luxury status symbol.
Let's move to Section 3, the final buyer verdict. Here are your actionable takeaways.
So, how should you actually proceed? Well, you should absolutely buy a Genesis, specifically a real model like the GV80, if you want luxury on a budget, a beautifully clean design, and high-end daily comfort. That's a smart, solid purchase. On the flip side, you should avoid this entire situation immediately if you specifically want this exact Night Emperor version, or if you expect verified specs, an official production model, and high resale certainty. If you fall into that second group, do yourself a favor and walk away from the social media hype right now.
If you absolutely love this 10 out of 10 aggressive design and you really want to make it a reality, here is your smart buyer advice, broken down into concrete steps. Step 1. Look for a real existing Genesis GV80 on the lot. Step 2. Take it to a reputable shop and modify it yourself to capture this aesthetic safely. And step 3, which is really the biggest takeaway here, do not trust viral social media posts blindly. Never assume that the concept cars popping up on your timeline are actually available for sale. To wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with this final summarizing truth from our source material. This SUV is more fantasy than reality. The aesthetics, undeniably a 10 out of 10. It's a gorgeous piece of digital art. But when it comes to real-world availability, it scores a hard 0. Your buying practicality entirely depends on separating the digital dream from the actual physical model sitting on a dealership floor.
Which really leaves us wondering, as we scroll through endless images of impossible perfection, how many other stunning, jaw-dropping vehicles on your timeline right now are just digital illusions waiting for a reality check. Keep your eyes open, verify the specs, and always question the source before you fall in love with a render. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.